Hey Cross Park, welcome to your leadership update video for this week. I got a couple things to tell you about. It's kind of a show and tell prop video this week. First, coming up, we've got a membership class October 22nd. So if you're interested in possibly joining Cross Park Church, we'd love for you to join us. Please email me, jeff@crossparkchurch.org, if you have not already. If you're interested, we have some videos, membership application, and content to send you to check out before the class. Then you join us for about an hour or so for lunch on the 22nd. And then we'll talk about what the process is after that if you are interested in joining. So again, no requirement that you join the church right now if you're thinking about it, and no requirement to follow up on the class and definitely join. But if you're thinking about joining, or if you just want to know more about membership at Cross Park, this class is a great way to do it. But we do need to hear from you so we can send you the videos. And please, if you're thinking about it, please do RSVP so we can order you lunch. Okay, here's my first show and tell kind of item. Trunk or treat coming up at Hemby. You see this here. The YMCA is hosting a trunk or treat event Saturday, October 28th for the YMCA families from 4 to 6 o'clock at Hemby. And so we want to send a team of people. Will Milks is heading this up, and we would love for you to join Will out there. We've got a couple different ways you can get involved that day. We're going to have a table decorated. Think about our tent, one of our welcome table tent set up, decorated, passing out treats, but also being a welcoming presence at Hemby and letting people know a little bit about the fact that Cross Park is meeting there. So that's a great way you can participate. We'd love for several of our families, maybe particularly if you have youth or younger kids, who would be excited to come out there to trunk or treat on Saturday the 28th from 4 to 6. Sunday morning, there'll be ways for you to sign up. We'll tell you more about it Sunday. But there are three things you could do. So the number one thing is come help out at the Cross Park table. Number two is Hemby could use help with both event parking, or you can sign up to bring your own car decorated and be another trunk in the trunk or treat line, passing out treats yourself as a family. That's a great option too. So trunk or treat, Saturday the 28th. Listen, come Sunday morning, listen to it. Find out the various ways you can sign up this Sunday. Also, you can email will@crossparkchurch.org for more info. All right, those are the announcements I have for today. But I have one more show and tell for our discussion. I'm going to hold this up and maybe you can think about it for a second. Trying to hold this where you can see it. Take a look at it. See if you can figure out what it is. Obviously, it's a painting. Those are Chinese characters you see in various places on the painting. This is a Chinese painting of the wedding at Cana, which is our passage this week. And I share this to you for a couple of reasons. One, I like it. Two, it's our passage. And so I always like sort of looking at how different people have artistically represented something going on in the Bible. It is good food for thought to see what the artist has done. But I want you to notice something about this painting. My guess is that for most of you, when you first see this, you immediately catch culturally that this is a Chinese painting. It's intended to look and feel like a Chinese wedding. Weddings in Chinese culture are a really big deal. This symbol right here is called the Shuangxi, double happiness, which means people put this symbol up at weddings and for weddings and about weddings as a way to say we wish you great happiness as you get married. It's a celebration. A wedding is a celebration. And so this Sunday, we are in this passage, John 2, the wedding at Cana. And obviously, you'll hear me say all the things in the sermon Sunday morning. But I wanted to hold this up for you today, just to get you thinking a little bit. And particularly, I wanted you to think about the rightness of how this Christian artist has painted this image in a Chinese milieu, right? So this is a Chinese painting, but it's also an ancient Near Eastern story about Jesus. And it's a universal story. Jesus has come for all people. And so I wanted to think briefly about this idea of contextualization. It's so interesting that Christianity has always had this instinct. The Christian mission has always understood that there's something universal about the gospel. It's for every person It's for all tribes, tongues, and people, all cultures can be redeemed and rescued by the gospel of Jesus. And so because of that, Christian missions historically have wrestled with this question. We know that human cultures, any human culture, is going to be a mix of good and bad things, sinful, wicked, terrible, destructive patterns, but also some common grace insights. We all know we're human. We know there's a God, even if we suppress that knowledge or don't know the details. And so all human cultures are going to have some really positive things in them and some really negative things in them. And the gospel can come into any culture and in some ways both affirm it and critique it, right? And so Christianity has historically understood that it's important to take the timeless message and put it in the context of any particular place. Now, why? How do we see this biblically? Well, one, you've got this interesting idea of the incarnation. Now, Jesus coming into our world in the flesh as a full human, of course, that's an utterly unrepeatable thing. It's unique. There's nothing else like it. And yet, there is a kind of pattern there where I wouldn't say Jesus leaves the culture of heaven for the culture of earth. I think that's maybe overreading it. And yet he is legitimately coming into our context in a way to fully inhabit it and both to critique it and to affirm the right things. So there's some sense in which the incarnation gives us a kind of pattern for that. Secondly, and maybe even more broadly, this idea of accommodation, that God is always having to, in some way, adjust to his creatures to properly communicate to us. So Calvin sort of joked that, God is speaking in divine baby talk. He's speaking on our level, right? He's putting things in the lowest shelf so we can actually understand it and grasp it. He's infinite and perfect. We cannot understand him on our own. So God accommodates his revelation, his speech, his work. He does it in a way that we can read it, hear it, understand it. And that's a good principle for how we want to take the timeless message of the gospel and put it in any context. I also think there's this, the Bible talks about this several times, to be all things to all people. In 1 Corinthians 9, you see Paul in Acts 17, where he both talks about what he sees in Athens. You've got these shrines for unknown gods. Let me tell you that the unknown God can be known. So he doesn't simply say you're wrong and stupid. He says, I see that you're very religious, that you have instincts here for various spiritual things. He affirms some of that, but then he also shows them how Jesus is the right and better option. And then even Matthew 28, right? We're called to go. We're baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, but to go to all nations and to make disciples. And so what the Christian church has innately understood throughout its history is that often is going to mean learning language, learning culture, learning how to connect and adapt. So there's all these different angles in the Bible about how it makes sense for us that we're going to want to and need to adapt. Now, interestingly, right, like many forms of Islam would argue, well, you have to read the Quran in Arabic to really get it, for it to be the true deal. Christianity has never believed that. We don't think you have to read the Bible in Greek and Hebrew simply to understand it, because we believe that God wants to communicate his truth to us. He wants to communicate his grace to us. And so he takes his word, perfect, eternal word, and he comes into the flesh and he speaks. Even right, a lot of Jesus' experience in his life would have been done in Aramaic. And then immediately it's written down in Greek. They also probably spoke some Greek. We don't know how much Greek who spoke or what. It was a kind of lingua franca, the trade language of the day anyway. So lots of people would have spoken some Greek. So it's not surprising that the apostles could write in Greek. But even think immediately there, you've got a lot of the spoken experience was in Aramaic, and yet it was written down in Greek so it could go far and wide, so more people could read it and understand it. So we want to contextualize. We want to avoid ditches. We don't want to over or under contextualize, right? And I've always called this being squishy or stingy. We don't want to be either of those things. That, again, we want to take the fixed, timeless truth of the gospel, the fact of who Jesus was. He was a real person. He came, he lived, he died, he rose again for you. We want to take that and properly communicate that in and to a wide variety of cultures. So if we under-contextualize, if we're stingy, we're not going to get very far with people, right? We're going to say everything in jargon. We're going to only speak from one perspective. Now, of course, none of us, all of our experience of Christianity is also enculturated, right? We're not Aramaic or Hebrew or Greek. We're not living in the original setting either. So already there needs to be some understanding that those things have adjusted. But if we're stingy, right, you have to always come entirely to me and on my terms. But if we're squishy, we'll go far with people, right? Like, hey, I'm speaking your language, I'm in your world, but we won't get that far with the gospel, actually, right? We won't be able to say the hard things about the gospel because we're trying so hard to be heard. A really stingy gospel isn't good news because no one's good enough for it, right? You have to adapt entirely to the speaker if you're being stingy. And that sort of misses grace, right? Like, part of the point of Jesus coming to us is he came to us. He came all the way to where we were, both fully human, and he fully entered into sin and death in order to take it away from us. But when we're stingy, we sort of say you have to be just right in doctrine and behavior, and so we will too easily push off and disqualify people. And this is natural. We see the world through our own eyes, and in some ways, many of us were trying really hard to be good, and so we exclude people inappropriately. And so a stingy gospel, that sort of stinginess with the truth, misses the fact that the gospel is really for anyone and everyone. It's full of amazing grace. Jesus comes all the way to you. Now, on the other side, a really squishy gospel isn't good news because it isn't news at all. It's often just emotion or well-wishing. It's sentiment, but it isn't good news because it doesn't hold tightly to who Jesus really is. It's willing to over and over redefine what sin is. It misses who Jesus really is and the revolutionary implications for us. So we can tell people, we can give them good advice, right? Oh, Jesus did some nice things. He would love to do some good things in your life. We want good things for you, but there's no new creation in that. There's not new life there. Right? Part of what we've been saying the last couple of weeks in the sermon is that what's important about Jesus is he can give you a truly new identity. He's not just giving you advice, he's giving you news, right? He's changing reality so that you can now inhabit that reality in a new way. So the squishy gospel can't really tell people, come follow Jesus. Because in our squishiness, we have to deny many of the fixed, timeless, fundamental truths in order to get a hearing. Right? We want a hearing. We want people to hear the gospel, but if we compromise too much on the truth, if we get rid of the key ideas in the gospel, then we don't have anything to share with them. The squishy gospel often ends up in the realm of self-affirmation. Well, Jesus thinks you're pretty great, and that's the end of the story. There's nothing else to say. The prosperity gospel, right? Jesus just wants to deliver you goods and services. And so, pray hard, have some faith in him, and he'll give you some good stuff. Or just sort of, we end up being like a chaplain to the culture. Well, I'm a non-judgmental presence. I just want to affirm you. Now listen, Jesus affirms us way more than anyone else ever could. We're made in his image. We're loved so deeply by him that he's given himself up to love us, rescue us, save us, change us. I mean, the amount of affirmation available in the gospel far exceeds any other form of affirmation. But oftentimes, in the desire to be affirming, we cut out the truths of the gospel and we get real squishy. So we don't want to be squishy or stingy, right? We want to try to live in the balanced place where we have clear, firm, true doctrine. We're following who Jesus has revealed himself to be, truly. And we understand that he's come in order to connect with people. So we're willing to be incredibly gracious, humble, far-reaching in who we talk to and how we talk about the gospel, looking to offer Jesus to all people. And all of this, right, was generated by thinking about this. Here again, a Chinese depiction of the wedding at Cana. The wedding in Cana was in Cana, not China. We all know that. The artist knows that. But it's a way to point out that to Chinese people, Jesus is for you. Jesus came to you. You know what a wedding's like. You've been to great weddings. Chinese culture loves a good wedding, like every other culture, I think. And so here Jesus comes into one of the key moments of life, someone's wedding, and he does this amazing miracle that changes everything. Because what Jesus is doing is, and we'll talk about it Sunday morning, is he's pointing beyond the water into wine miracle. He's pointing to the fullness of who he is and what he has to offer to every tribe, tongue, and nation. So just some food for thought as we head towards Sunday morning. We'd love to see you at 10:30. We'll be in John 2, looking at this wedding in Cana. 9:30 is Sunday school. Thanks for watching Cross Park. We'll see you Sunday morning.